just lost her most powerful ally in the British mainstream media, woke ITV. Specifically, two of her...
Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's rescue dog Mamma Mia is living her moment after the Beagle Freedom Project shared a new update into life she enjoys with the Sussexes. Known as Mia, the Beagle was rescued in 2022 when the Envigo breeding facility was shut down. The facility had been connected to the animal testing industry. And Mia was among the dogs given a chance at a new life. Beagle Freedom Project highlighted Mia's journey in a video, describing her as a resilient rescue who is now part of a royal household. The footage included images before her adoption. Surrounded by puppies she left behind, her new life was recently seen in a much lighter moment when Meghan included Mia in a video marking her 45th birthday. As the Duke and Duchess of Sussex danced together in their kitchen, Mia could be seen rolling around on the floor while their black Labrador, Pulla, wandered through the scene carrying a party hat in her mouth. According to the Beagle Freedom Project, Mia even joined the birthday celebrations wearing her own silver party hat. The organization described the transformation as a happy ending for a dog who had once been rescued from the animal testing industry and was now celebrating with her forever family. Nobody wanted it. That was the open secret inside palace corridors for years. A role so tangled in controversy, so laden with diplomatic landmines, that senior royals quietly stepped back from it one by one. And then Meghan Markle, the woman the institution had spent years trying to sideline, walked straight toward it. What happened next surprised even her fiercest critics. There's a version of Meghan's story that gets told constantly, particularly in the British press, and it goes something like this: she came, she struggled, she left. But sources close to the situation suggest the real story is considerably more complicated and considerably more interesting than that tidy narrative allows. Because buried inside the wreckage of her royal years is a chapter that most commentators have quietly glossed over. A moment when Meghan Markle did something that the rest of the family, with all their centuries of institutional training, simply wouldn't do. To understand why this matters, you have to go back to the architecture of the royal family itself. Palace insiders have long described the working royal structure as something like a theater company, where certain roles carry prestige and certain roles carry risk. The glamorous positions, the ones tied to the military, to patronages with global visibility, to causes that photograph beautifully, those are the ones that get quietly competed over. Then there are the roles nobody talks about. The causes that are complicated, the patronages tied to communities that are misunderstood, the appointments that require genuine engagement rather than ceremonial ribbon cutting. Reports suggest that in the years before Meghan joined the family, at least two senior royals had been offered connections to a particular area of charitable and diplomatic work tied to Commonwealth communities in the United Kingdom, communities with deep Caribbean heritage, and both had declined. The reasons were never stated publicly, but sources indicate the reluctance was partly about optics, partly about complexity, and partly about the sheer amount of genuine work the role demanded without the guaranteed positive press coverage that tended to follow more visible royal engagements. When Meghan arrived in 2017 and began her period of learning the institutional landscape, she was, by multiple accounts, given what one palace source described as the standard new arrival tour of available patronages. These were presented to her as options, as opportunities to carve out her royal identity. Most incoming royals gravitate toward the safe choices: the children's hospitals, the arts foundations, the mental health charities that by that point had already been so effectively claimed by William, Kate, and Harry that they practically defined the younger generation's public brand. Meghan, according to accounts that have emerged in subsequent years, kept asking questions about the Commonwealth-linked work. She wanted to understand why it had been left sitting without a senior royal champion for so long. The answer she received, sources suggest, was diplomatic but essentially honest. It was complicated work. It required cultural fluency. It invited scrutiny. And perhaps most tellingly, it hadn't previously been seen as the kind of role that generated the photogenic moments that sustain a royal's public profile. That answer, remarkably, appears to have been exactly what interested her. What unfolded over the following months was something that palace watchers who were paying close attention found genuinely striking. While significant attention was being directed at Meghan's wedding preparations and her adjustment to royal life, she was simultaneously doing something that barely registered in the press. She was building relationships. She was meeting with community leaders, visiting organizations, having conversations that weren't announced in advance and weren't photographed. Reports suggest that some of these conversations were deeply substantive, that she was doing the kind of listening work that precedes genuine advocacy rather than the kind that precedes a nicely framed press opportunity. Sources indicate that certain palace staff found this approach difficult to categorize. royal engagements have a fairly established shape. There is an arrival, there is a greeting, there is a walkabout, there is a brief formal interaction, there is a departure. What Meghan appeared to be attempting didn't map neatly onto that structure, and that created its own kind of institutional friction. In an environment where tradition is both the comfort and the currency, doing something differently is rarely welcomed without resistance. The tension that built during this period wasn't simply about tabloid coverage or family dynamics, though both of those were certainly present. It was also, reports suggest, about a more fundamental disagreement over what royal patronage was actually for. Was it symbolic endorsement, lending the institution's prestige to a cause, or was it active participation, bringing genuine influence and sustained attention to communities that had historically been seen but not heard within the royal framework? Meghan, by multiple accounts, was pursuing the latter. And that made some people inside the institution deeply uncomfortable. Then came the moment that shifted everything. In early 2019, at an engagement that had been positioned as relatively routine, Meghan made a series of remarks that were not in any prepared briefing notes. Speaking to a group of young women from Caribbean heritage communities in London, she spoke directly about visibility, about the importance of seeing yourself reflected in institutions that claim to represent you, and about the responsibility that comes with a platform. Palace insiders have confirmed that the remarks were not scripted, were not cleared in advance, and caused significant conversation in the hours that followed. The reaction split almost immediately along predictable lines. Sections of the British press treated it as evidence of Meghan going off script, of a dangerous tendency toward improvisation in a context that demands control. But within the communities she had been quietly engaging with for the preceding months, the response was something quite different. According to accounts from community leaders present that day, the reaction was profound. Here was a senior member of the royal family speaking not at them but with them, acknowledging historical complexity rather than smoothing over it. What changed after that moment was subtle but real. The nature of the requests coming to Meghan's team shifted. Organizations that had previously seen royal patronage as largely symbolic began reaching out with substantive asks. They wanted sustained engagement, not just appearances. And according to reports, Meghan's team began responding accordingly. The aftermath of all this, of course, unfolded very publicly in a way that most viewers will be broadly familiar with. The Sussexes' departure from royal duties in early 2020 meant that whatever was being built through this quieter, harder, less glamorous work was abruptly discontinued. The patronages were eventually redistributed. The relationships Meghan had been cultivating were left, in many cases, without a royal champion once again. Sources within some of those community organizations have since spoken with careful, deliberate words about what was lost in that transition. Not dramatically, not in ways designed to generate headlines, but with a genuine sense that something rare had briefly existed and then been taken away. One community leader, speaking to a journalist on Background, described it as the feeling of a door having opened and then quietly closed again. What the institution did with the space Meghan had occupied tells its own story. The roles were redistributed, but the particular character of the work, the community-embedded, culturally specific, deliberately unglamorous dimension of it, appears to have been diluted back towards something more ceremonial. Reports suggest that several of the organizations involved received formal acknowledgments and reassurances, but that the sustained, relationship-based engagement was not replicated in the same way. So what does this story actually mean? Stepping back from the details and looking at the shape of it, it raises a question that the royal family has never quite found a comfortable way to answer. What is the institution actually for in the 21st century for communities whose relationship with the crown is genuinely complicated by history? The Commonwealth is not a simple entity. It carries within it the full weight of colonial history, the ongoing conversations about reparation and recognition, the complexity of what it means to maintain ceremonial ties with an institution built in part on the extraction of wealth and labor from the very communities it now claims to celebrate. Meghan, whatever her personal flaws or missteps during her royal years, appears to have engaged with that complexity rather than avoided it. She chose the role no one else wanted precisely because it was hard. And the institution's inability to sustain that work after she left suggests something uncomfortable about what the palace is actually willing to do versus what it is willing to be seen doing. The question I keep returning to is this: if the work was valuable enough that community leaders mourned its loss, and difficult enough that senior royals had declined it for years, what does it tell us that the one person who finally stepped into it was also the one person the institution seemed most determined to push out? That's not a question with a comfortable answer. And I suspect it's one the palace would very much prefer we stopped asking. which of course is exactly why we should keep asking it. Let me know in the comments what you think this says about the future of the monarchy and its relationship with the Commonwealth. And if you found this one interesting, there's more where this came from.